Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Real quick, I'm doing online dynasties this year for both Madden and college football 26. So if you're interested in joining a college football 26 dynasty or a Madden 26 dynasty, let me know by joining the Patreon at the dog check tier level and commenting on the post on the Patreon website. Also, for select YouTube members, this invite will also be going out. So let me know. We're going to get this thing started. Now, enjoy the video. Hey, what's up, everybody? Day one of Browns joint practice versus the Philadelphia Eagles has wrapped. A couple of interesting notes from this practice. Unfortunately, the injury cycle the Browns have been dealing with at quarterback all camp. I talked about it in a video where it's basically derailed Kenny Pickett entirely. Is continuing, and now it has hit Shedeur Sanders. So the last man standing. It's incredible. Every quarterback we've come into camp with has missed time for injury, except for old man Flacco. That's incredible to me. Shedeur Sanders has missed time, missed 2 days of practice, essentially, with shoulder soreness and an oblique strain. Dylan Gabriel with the hamstring, Kenny Pickett with the hamstring, and Joe Flacco is the last man standing at age 41. I do think there are some reasons why that's the case, and experience has to do with a lot of it, because Joe Flacco understands just how hard he really has to go in training camp to be able to demonstrate what he needs to demonstrate. He's done like 20 training camps. He knows what to avoid. You know, like I make the joke about Kenny Pickett, right, all the time, that he pretty much derailed his entire training camp because he sprinted full speed in an unpadded practice. I know people make excuses for it, but the reasons I make fun of that is because he should know better. And this is something that Joe Flacco would not do, right? Joe Flacco will run in practice, but he's not going to run to the extent where he's going to risk injury, right? He understands his limits, what he can and cannot do. Also, Joe Flacco really good at just getting rid of the ball and not taking a hit here. So age maybe physically might not be a helpful factor for him, but it certainly is helping him, or at least that experience that comes with his age has helped him avoid injury. But yeah, don't want to bury the lead here. Shedeur Sanders got injured in practice today. Now, it doesn't seem like it's anything catastrophic. It seems like it's an oblique injury that kept him out. Maybe this is something very similar to the shoulder soreness he dealt with at practice. When I was up there, he was back up a couple of days later, going full go after that injury. So maybe this might be a similar thing for Shedeur, where, you know, he misses a day of practice, which might be today, but he's ready to go tomorrow, or maybe he misses tomorrow's practice, but he's ready to go in the game. There was a lot of speculation going on while this injury was happening, and I just want to take time to address this, right? Because before this injury was announced, all people knew was that Shedeur Sanders was not taking any reps in team drills, and that Tyler Huntley was taking reps over him. And immediately the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people was like, hey, the Browns are putting Shedeur Sanders below Tyler Huntley in the depth chart. Now, again, this is one of those things where I'm not really talking about the general fan more than I'm talking about people who are in the media, right? Because the general fan, they're going to see that, they're going to have a reaction, they're going to go back to doing whatever it is that they're doing. This necessarily is not their job, right? So I'm not going to put the same expectations I have on myself and people who work in this industry that I have on regular folk, right? That's not fair. But to those who kind of ran with this idea that the Browns were like going to bench Shedeur for Tyler, it demonstrates just a amazing lack of critical thinking in our media landscape that is very concerning to me, right? Because My immediate thought when he wasn't practicing with the team was simple. Well, we've went through this before, right? Where he's held out of team drills and everybody freaks out and thinks he got demoted. But ultimately, we found out at the practice that he had an injury, right? So my first instinct was, hey, I'm going to use that experience to learn from and understand, hey, he might just be injured. That was not what most people were doing. And that was kind of disappointing to see. So just keep in mind, right? If you see something like that, where somebody in the media decides to get a piece of information like that and then jump to a conclusion, they're telling you who they are and what they're ultimately pushing at the end of the day, right? If they get a little bit of information like that and they tell you, oh, yep, see the Browns, they're trying to sabotage Shedeur or whatever it is because, Tyler Huntley's taking snaps over him and Shadeur's not taking team reps despite the fact that we don't know why he's not. Just use that as information to understand that that person who's telling you that is more interested in selling you a story than selling you what's actually happening. Because anybody who's interested in the truth, anybody who's invested in what's going to go down, in reality, would have waited until there was an announcement after practice to then speculate on why he missed practice, right? So just keep that in mind, right? Whenever you're surveying different people that you trust for media, and this is a standard that I like to hold myself up to, if I don't, call me out on it. But, if information, if I'm too hot to jump to a conclusion, that's probably because I'm trying to confirm a bias. And confirmation bias in media is a huge problem. And if you can avoid people who are prone to confirmation bias in your media diet, I think that makes for a more healthy life overall. So that's just my piece of worldly advice after this story broke out, because there was a lot of reactions to it. Now, as far as like how bad the oblique injury is for Shedeur, we have no clue. Again, this could be something that's over with in a day or two. This could be a week or two problem, right? Kind of like with Kenny Pickett's hamstring, where it seemed like it was a bigger deal than not. We'll find out more information as time goes on with the Shedeur Sanders thing. I really hope he's able to play on Saturday, because I would want to see what his progression looks like from playing last week, knocking off some of that rust, and then going in this week and being able to play. How much better does he look? Because I think he would be a lot more accurate than he was last week. And what kind of progress he can make in that week, and then also, what he cleans up from tape in that game and how that compares to what we will see from Dylan Gabriel. So, really hoping that he can get back sooner than later and get to this preseason game. It does feel like he's having a lot of throwing motion related injuries. Now, I don't know if this is this might be somebody ran into his side and hurt him. And that's why, because when you hear an oblique injury, if it's on his throwing side, usually you're like, oh, that has something to do with that throwing motion. But I don't know if an oblique injury is super common with throwing at a high velocity like that. He had the shoulder soreness. Again, if these are minor injuries, then I think we're really, overreacting. But just not knowing the severity of the injury, I think, is the question here. And also, I want to point this out because I did kind of do that rant earlier. It's okay to ask questions once you hear the explanation, if the explanation does not sound good. But, my whole thing is just wait for the explanation before we start jumping to conclusions, to see if that explanation makes any sense, because if they would have came out here and said, Shedeur didn't practice because of undisclosed reasons, then yeah, be critical of that all you want. Come up with any kind of reason because the Browns left the door open for it. But if it's something as straightforward as he got injured, then, we kind of wasted a lot of time and just opened a lot of doors that really should have been left closed. But yeah, oblique injury, we'll see what happens. I really don't want to over speculate on the long-term nature of this whole thing because I don't even know if it's serious. But that happened with Shedeur. That was probably the biggest story coming out of today. It did seem like the Browns had a decent showing in this practice. A lot of going back and forth with Philadelphia from the reports at camp. You heard that the Browns had a couple of plays be made. The Eagles had some. The Browns defense had some plays be made. Good pressure. Daniel Ofuise, who I've had on this show, he works for ESPN. He put out this tweet and he said, first thoughts leaving day one of Browns Eagles joint practice. I thought both Cleveland's offense and defense held up fairly well against probably the best O-line and D-line in the NFL. It's a really good sign. It wasn't crisp at practice at all for the offense, but I thought that was more indicative of pass catchers dropping passes and not being able to get open versus a stout secondary. So, it was more of, just good football instead of bad operation, I believe is what he's saying. On defense, I think concerns about the Browns' cornerback depth were highlighted today. So let's start here with the first part of that analysis here, right? And it wasn't a crisp. The Browns' offensive and defensive lines held up fairly well. That's really good news. It's really good news. Now, we know the defensive line is going to be pretty good this year. I don't think there were that many concerns. I did talk about it in the video. I wanted to see Mason Graham kind of have a good week this week because it's going to be more of a game day type situation for him. But the other part of this that I think is a lot more encouraging is that our offensive line is holding up, because I think there's a lot of questions about this offensive line, right? Because the line last year was not good. Now, there are a lot of reasons out there for why the line wasn't good, a lot of theories out there for why the line wasn't good. Me personally, I kind of believe that when it comes to pass blocking, health and Deshaun Watson and Dorian Thompson-Robinson had a lot to do with the failure of the pass blocking unit overall, because of how those two things kind of combine to make each other worse, right? Health, obviously, you're not healthy. You're down to like your third or fourth string tackle at times while these guys are on the field. And then technique wise, we know that Deshaun Watson's one of the worst pocket mechanics in the NFL. Even at his best, he wasn't a good pocket mechanic or good at avoiding sacks. So that has always been a problem with him. And it got bigger and bigger as his run in Cleveland continued. So I think that was a lot of why the pass blocking looked bad. If you look, they played like 2 games last year where the offensive line was healthy and they did not have to deal with Deshaun Watson in the pocket. And both those games, I believe they put up more than sufficient PFF grades for those games. Pretty good numbers when it comes to hurries and pressures allowed. And I think that kind of demonstrates the point for me. Now, if you choose a different theory for why the offensive line didn't look good, that's more, you're right, because ultimately we don't know why the offensive line didn't look good. I can have my theory on it. You can have your theory on it. But what we do want to see is this offensive line look good versus test like the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's nice to hear that the offensive line held its own, because, again, a lot of Browns fans are rightfully concerned about what that offensive line is going to look like. The key players on it are older. They haven't had peak years in a while. There's a legitimate concern there. So that was great to hear. Now, it wasn't a crisp practice at all for the offense. More indicative of pass catchers dropping passes. It's not good. And not being able to get open versus a stout secondary. Now, I can interpret that sentence a couple of different ways, right? You can interpret that the Browns wide receivers suck and they were getting blanketed by the Eagles, or you can interpret it as the Eagles secondary just had a good day, and we're just especially good at coverage. I think it's probably a little bit of both, right? Jerry Jeudy could probably get open, but probably had a rough day. They have really, really good corners there. I wouldn't be surprised by that, right? The same thing with David Njoku. Maybe they have better days tomorrow, but overall, we know that this Browns wide receiving room does not have a ton of depth. So there is that, right? Again, Deontay Johnson not coming off a good week from preseason, at least against Carolina. So really need him to step up sooner than later, because it's not been super encouraging on that project the last couple of days. So there is that as well. And then the last thing on defense, I think concerns about the Browns cornerback depth were highlighted today. I have been screaming about this for weeks now. If you're tired of hearing me complain about the cornerback room, you're tired of hearing me complain about slot corner, look, man, it's a problem. I don't think Greg Newsome was back today. So there's that, right? And I do think Greg Newsome being back will make a difference. But we also have to remember, we have our issues with Greg Newsome, right? It's not like Greg Newsome is a carbon copy of Denzel Ward, who looks fantastic, right? Greg Newsome has his own issues. But we're not even focused on that part of Greg Newsome's game because it's so much worse than Greg Newsome after you get past Greg Newsome on the depth chart. It gets so much worse than Greg Newsome. And I think that is the bigger problem for the Cleveland Browns because this pass rush can be as great as you want it to be. But if guys are getting open immediately, it's not going to matter, right? That's the big problem that I have with the secondary. And I'm really hopeful that the Browns have something in plan to improve the depth here. Maybe it's Nick Needham, maybe it's other guys, but man, there has to be a plan because I'm not satisfied with what the Browns have right now at the slot corner position. I'm not satisfied with what they have after Greg Newsome. And I think a lot of this is kind of taking our eye off the fact that Greg Newsome's not a perfect number 2 corner. There are some problems with that secondary for sure. Martin Emerson going down, big deal for this defense. So we'll see. You know, they have a lot of issues in the slot here, a lot of issues with slot coverage. And look, I'm going to focus on things that I think are strengths of this team that need to be amplified more than I'm going to focus on something that I think they are already building in to this year's plan as a weakness, right? The pass catchers didn't look good. The offense wasn't super crisp against the Eagles. We all kind of expected that, right? That the Browns offense wasn't just going to blow away the Super Bowl champion defense of the Philadelphia Eagles that made Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs look inept in the Super Bowl. We expected the offense to struggle. And honestly, during the season, we're going to expect the offense to struggle quite a bit because that's kind of what the plan is for the Cleveland Browns. So no, I'm not going to focus on the pass catchers not being as good as much as I'm going to focus on slot corner and the corner depth because I think that's going to be more detrimental to the Browns' plan for success this year, not being able to cover at an adequate level on the defensive side of the ball because the defense is going to be such a huge part of how the Browns plan to win games, right? The offensive line is going to play a larger role for the Cleveland Browns because that's going to be a huge part of the run game for this football team. So them looking good is something I'm going to focus on, right? The things that we know that they've been telling us aren't going to be the greatest, not being the greatest, not really news, right? So I'm not going to focus on that as much as like the offensive line, which is good, and then this corner depth looking bad, which is very concerning. And I think this practice moves me up to an even more concerned level about the corner depth because it keeps looking worse. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It does not look good. It did not look good when I watched them in practice. You saw them in the preseason game. It didn't look good. Their first joint practice, it didn't look good. Their second joint practice, it doesn't look good. At what point do you make a move here? Because it doesn't look like Cam Mitchell is going to be able to do the job. Miles Harden is not there yet. Is it going to be Nick Needham? If it's going to be Nick Needham, I need to see Nick Needham in the lineup to see how he looks. If it's going to be Tony Brown, you got to throw him out there. Like, at this point, it's looked so bad so long that I want something done, like moved or got the guys to get chances. I mean, again, Nick Needham's a vet, so maybe you just trust to throw him in, but I at least want some confirmation that that's going to work before we even see it. It's very concerning right now. And hopefully I'm concerned about nothing, right? I would love to bring up all these concerns and be worried about this team, and this team is actually perfect and they win a Super Bowl. But I don't think that's the reality we're living in. So, you know, I think these concerns are very, very, very valid. Good defense, but a bad secondary with this kind of a defense can really, really make things worse. So let me know. So that's my thoughts. Y'all let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Are you concerned about another injury here for Sanders? Is it fascinating to you that Joe Flacco, of all people, Is the one guy still standing after all of this? Do you think that Shedeur will be back for the preseason game? Do you even want Shedeur to play in the preseason game after hearing about the oblique injury and everything else? Let me know in the comment section how you guys feel. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.